Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Cool Sports Network. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and today I am joined by a very special guest, the Jets digital reporter for Heavy Sports and co host of the Man Child Show with Boy Green, Paul Boy Green Esden. Paul, welcome to the show.
Chase, thanks for friggin' having me, baby. This is terrific.
I'm so glad you are able to be here to talk some Jets football. Obviously, we are nearing the NFL season, which I think no matter what team you cheer for makes everyone happy. So, why don't we start off for people who aren't as familiar with your work? Explain exactly what you do covering the Jets and how people listening to this can find some of your content.
Of course. So I host a daily New York Jets video podcast that's also available if people listen to the audio only version. So I do that every day at 7:30 in the morning live, normally from my home office in Oswego, New York. I'm currently, as of recording of the show, in Syracuse because I also do a sports talk radio show here, and I work with the Syracuse Mets. But I do a daily New York Jets coverage. It's normally like an hour show, give or take. I welcome in phone calls. I share insights. I have guests that I've been able to build my Rolodex over the last decade or so in the business to have insiders on, players on, current players on the team, former players on the team, things of that nature. For Heavy, I write for the team. So, write articles every day, 2, 3, 4 articles, depends on the day, news bits, and also opinionated columns of whatever's going on with the team. So I do some of that action as well. And a little, again, it's just kind of a little bit of everything. I do obviously radio here at the station where we talk some Jets. I do video products of Boy Green Daily where we talk about the Jets, the articles. So it's a little bit of everything. Kind of have a lot of different feathers in the cap. But of course, people can follow me on all social media. It's at Boy Green 25, BOY Green the color 25. I got the nickname Boy Green from here at the radio station for being this crazy Jets fan, and the 25 was my football jersey number in high school. So it makes it real easy. I'm there on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, X, YouTube, all of it. It's all consistent on the brand, baby.
Absolutely. And you make some amazing content for the audience. If you guys do not want to remember or you're too lazy to look it up, the links to all of the content where you can find Boy Green is in the description. But you guys aren't here for us to talk about announcing. You're here for us to talk about the New York frickin' Jets. And you've been covering the Jets for a long time now. And during the span, multiple different quarterbacks have been taken in the top 3 picks in the draft. Aaron Rodgers has been there, but more focusing in on Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. Neither made it past their rookie contract with the New York Jets. Do you feel that the New York market may hurt some of these younger, hyped up quarterbacks and prospects in general that are being drafted to New York? And maybe that's part of the reason why they have failed to reach the success that New York was hoping for?
It's a great question, Chase, because obviously it's the biggest media market in the world. The spotlight is very intense as opposed to, and I don't want to pick on another market, but I don't know, the Denver Broncos. I don't know. If you're there in that market compared to here, there's hundreds of reporters in the room. There's covering every media outlet. There's the New York Post.
Right.
There's the Daily News. There's ESPN. There's the Athletic. I mean, and national reporters, NFL Network, NFL.com. So, I mean, there's just reporters everywhere. So when you make a mistake, it is scrutinized. When you do personal things like, whether it's Mark Sanchez eating a hot dog on the sideline of a game or goofy stuff off the field, whether it's salacious or what have you, where it's non-football activities that you get involved with. Obviously, some of the things Aaron Rodgers has said has stirred up a lot of people, and that gets souped up
Right.
even more being with the New York Jets. So bringing it back to younger players like Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson, I think that certain people are made for New York and certain people are not. And when you throw an interception and then you're reading about it in the tabloids, you're hearing about it on the radio, you're seeing it on television on Get Up, Jets
Mhm.
quarterback blows game for doing this. Sometimes that can destroy the confidence of a young quarterback. And then from there on out, it goes. So I think the media market certainly makes it more intense, but there's certain people who thrive. I'd give Eli Manning as a wonderful example, the former Ole Miss quarterback, and his calm, cool and collected mindset was something that vibed very well. He never went too high. He never went too low during his time with the New York Giants, was able to ride the waves. And he had some very rocky tenures throughout his career where there was a lot of turnovers and people wondered if he was the guy. And then they won the Super Bowl and then they won another Super Bowl. And all of a sudden, everything else kind of got figured out from there. So it takes the right kind of moxie. And there's been questions about how the Jets themselves as an organization have developed these players, whether it's with the talent that's around them, the coaching that's around them, how quickly they threw those guys out there. Because Zach Wilson was immediately cast into the light from that perspective. You mentioned Rodgers, he had to wait for 3 years. So I think there's a lot of contributing factors. But to go to the basis of your question, the media market is certainly intense, and not everyone is made for New York.
You're right with that. And I think Eli Manning is a great example. And I think a lot of things in sports, even if you're in the market or not, I'm a Ravens fan. If you look at Lamar Jackson on the Baltimore Ravens, a lot of people think mentally he's just not there in the postseason, that he's trying to do too much against Patrick Mahomes. You add in the New York market, and yes, you need to have that mental strength to be able to get through the criticism and all of that to win a Super Bowl. And it does take a lot. And you're right, it's not made for everyone. Someone that has been able to do it and has won in the playoffs is the Jets' new quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. I say new, you guys traded for him last offseason. Instead of trying to draft someone else, you guys moved in a different direction, drafted Aaron Rodgers, though we all know the story, only played 4 plays before tearing his Achilles last season. So now we're going into this new year. He's healthy. He got healthy really, really quickly. And he's a 4-time MVP, but do you think a 40-year-old coming off of an Achilles tear, will he be a great signal caller for the Jets this year? And what should we expect from a guy like Rodgers at this point in his career?
I need to quote a wise man if I can. Once a Great Dane dog named Scooby Doo went, "Arr!" And we don't know. We have no idea whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to deliver. That's a question I've asked his teammates. It's a question I've asked media members that have covered him. What kind of Aaron Rodgers are we going to get with all of those caveats that he gave? 40 years old. He turns 41 in December. He's coming off a very serious injury. He hadn't looked himself since the back-to-back MVP years. Like, what's everything that goes into that pile? And the truth is, we just don't have a lot of sample size of players of Aaron Rodgers' caliber in general. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. A guy that when you look at his injury history, when you look at his age, and you factor in all these different variables and you put them all in a pot and you start stirring it up, it's hard to know because there just isn't a lot of sample size. Vinny Testaverde, another former Jets quarterback who blew out his Achilles in the 1999 season opener.
Right.
He was a bit younger. He was in his mid-30s when he did that. Medical technology was far different at the end of the 20th century as it is here in the 21st century. So it's hard to, long story short, it's hard to, kind of put your temperature on what you believe you're going to get from Aaron Rodgers. Because like I said, prior to this year, 2 of the last 3 years, he was MVP, the most prominent individual award you can win as a player in the National Football League. So my expectation for Aaron Rodgers is that he is going to be a top 10 quarterback in football. Now, there's a chance he could be much higher than that. Maybe he's a top 7 quarterback in football. But I think comfortably he could be a top 10, which for the Jets is a dramatic improvement because they had the 33rd quarterback in football. And yes, I'm aware there's only 32 teams in the NFL. That's how bad the quarterback play was this past season with Zach Wilson stepping in. So the Jets are going to have the biggest quarterback jump of any NFL team, perhaps in NFL history, going from what Zach Wilson provided to a Pro Football Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers. So expectations are massive, and the only way to quench the thirst of New York Jet fans is to win a Super Bowl, and that's what Jet fans want, and perhaps those are very high to other people outside of the organization, outside of the market, but that's the goal here at One Jets Drive, is to hoist the Lombardi.
Long term, what do the Jets do at quarterback? Because you mentioned that in the past they've really struggled, I guess you could say, with developing some of these quarterbacks. You mentioned the Aaron Rodgers example of how he sat for a few years. We're seeing what Jordan Love is doing now as one of the great quarterbacks. I recently spoke with Mike Tannenbaum on the podcast, and he thinks the Packers are winning it all this year because of the development of Jordan Love and how him sitting out for a while really helped him grow as a player. So the Jets have really struggled, I think, to develop some of these quarterbacks in the past. What do you do after this year or the year after when Rodgers is older and moving on and retiring in his career? Do you try to trade for another quarterback? Do you try to sign someone in a big market? Like, what does the future look like in the Jets quarterback room once Rodgers departs?
It's a great question. You look at the room right now, and there are five guys in the room. Aaron Rodgers, who we mentioned is old, and you're trying to think of what's next. You have Tyrod Taylor. He's old. He's 35. He's not the future of the organization. You have two just kind of non-relative names in Andrew Peasley and Adrian Martinez. Those are know-nothing players in terms of this. And then you have Jordan Travis, who's an intriguing player. I'm curious on the upside. The floor seems incredibly high. He's a smart individual coming out of Florida State, but coming off of a gruesome leg injury. And I'd be surprised if he plays down or is around in terms of his football activity. I believe he'll be placed on IR and ultimately be ruled out for this season. A medical red shirt, essentially, is how I envision it at the NFL level. So he will just develop behind the scenes, but you don't really even know what you have there. So I think after this Rodgers run, what is it? Is it Rodgers potentially winning the Super Bowl in 2024 and walking away, and then the Jets have to answer that question in 2025? Does he stay the 2 years, as he sort of indicated in multiple interview opportunities, where he's going to play 2024, he's going to play 2025, then walk away? That answer to that question may change the answer. I think that the Jets, if they have great success with Rodgers, whether that's a Super Bowl or not, I think they're going to try to continue the contend train and then draft a young guy behind. So a guy that could stand out, Kirk Cousins. He's in Atlanta right now, and they have a youngster behind him that they eventually want to play. Maybe the timelines work out where Kirk Cousins is going to be on his way out from Atlanta. Jets can trade for Kirk Cousins, and he can replace Aaron Rodgers when he decides to hang him up. And you compete with a high-level veteran quarterback, and you just have this really talented roster around, and you continue from there. And then they draft a quarterback behind, whether that's Travis or a new guy to develop behind the scenes. I think that is the modus operandi. Do the Jets have their franchise quarterback on the roster right now? It's unclear and likely unlikely that guy is on the roster currently. So that player might still be playing in high school. That player might be playing in college. That is TBD. It's too much of a leap to say that Jordan Travis is or can be that guy for the New York Jets. But the Jets are focused all in right now on winning as fast as they can. But right now, it'd probably be a dart throw at Jordan Travis, and then they're probably looking for a veteran after Rodgers is done.
What I find really interesting is how you mentioned the Kirk Cousins thing, and I think it will be easier, even if the Jets haven't succeeded previously at really getting great quarterback talent. They are still in New York, and there are certain markets where no matter what, they can recruit free agents, and that is an advantage that I feel the Jets do have. And we'll see, maybe if a free agent would want to go there, sign with New York, maybe after Rodgers departs. But I think you're right. I think it's one of the biggest question marks on this team after this year and maybe after 2025, because I don't think right now they have a direction, but maybe if Rodgers stays one more year, they'll start to really focus more on that next offseason. But what the Jets did this offseason was improving the offensive line. They want to make sure they can protect Breece Hall. They want to make sure they can protect Rodgers. Was there a group, though, that you wish the Jets would have improved upon that you feel they, I guess you could say, lacked on improving this offseason?
Anywhere on the roster?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, sure. I would say one position in particular that people have made a strong argument for is safety. The Jets brought back Chuck Clark on a one-year deal for $2 million. That's a low-risk, high-reward move. He was a very good player prior to getting hurt last year, where he tore his ACL. He had a great run with Baltimore, where he played over 1,000 consecutive snaps over a 3-year period. So he's been terrific. And then Tony Adams is an undrafted free agent who certainly has surpassed the minimal expectations that existed when he first entered the league. But how good is he? What's the ceiling there? That is still up for question. Jets coaching staff is very high on Tony Adams. But there was a Justin Simmons hanging out there in the ethos. That could have been another all-in move. He ends up going to Atlanta. Speaking of the Falcons, he ends up going down there. So safety certainly could have been a position that the Jets improved on. Again, people talk about Bryce Huff and whether or not they being the New York Jets, should have retained him instead of letting a young ascending player walk. So you could talk about a different pass rusher, not named Hassan Reddick, that potentially could have been added to the mix. I like the linebackers, but people have brought up linebacker before. Some people have raised questions about Jamian Sherwood as the third linebacker on this team behind C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams. You could have potentially made a case for linebacker. There's been conversation about tight end. Brock Bowers hours, there was hot and heavy business about the New York Jets potentially adding a difference maker at the tight end position. I think a lot of people have overlooked Tyler Conklin, but what is Jeremy Ruckert? We have no idea. He's a guy that has been a little bit of an enigma since entering the league and not really living up to the hype, but he's been hurt, so it's been hard to tell. He's also been buried on the depth chart. And maybe the other one, if you were to, squint and make a comment, would be a true backup center, not named Wes Schweitzer, who plays guard and center, maybe getting a true guy back there behind Joe Tippmann. That might be some nitpicking. And then another pass catcher, Mike Williams, if he's healthy, has proven to be a terrific player. Garrett Wilson has been terrific, but a lot of people have been drilling about guys like Devontae Adams and some of the other star pass catchers that have been available this offseason. That's another place you can squint. But with all that being said, the Jets have one of the most talented rosters in football. They're in a great position heading into the season. They seemingly have depth at a lot of key positions. But if I were to kind of gloss over the roster, go group by group, that would probably be my analysis.
It's very funny you mentioned linebacker, and I think your team is talented when you go outside of C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams. We could use some help because, those two guys are incredible, and I think the Jets have more talent that a lot of people really understand. Will it come together as a team? There are question marks there, but from an individual talent and positional group standpoint, this is one of the most talented rosters in football. You're 100% right. And one of those guys is Breece. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up on one of the points you just made. That's why I think in the first 11 weeks of the season, the Jets have, I believe it's 6 or 7 standalone games where they're by themselves, and you have primetime games, you got a London game. I think the country is going to learn a lot more about some of these players. You mentioned Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley. Quincy Williams is a first-team All-Pro, and some people were talking this offseason that he's under the radar. How could he be under the radar as a first-team All-Pro linebacker? So that's just one example. DJ Reeds of the world, Michael Carter II. People don't know who's Garrett Wilson. Even a lot of people don't consider him in the same realm as Jamar Chase's, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lambs, and the like. I think Aaron Rodgers will raise the profile. The primetime games will raise the profile. And I think a lot of people are going to be like, "Whoa, this Jets roster is pretty good," and a lot of people are going to be like, "Yeah, we know."
100%. And one of those talented guys, personally, that I am a huge fan of is Breece Hall. And he had a terrific season last year after recovering from his injury he had in his rookie year. And a lot of coaches, scouts, and executives do believe that he is one of the best running backs in the league. In fact, they rated him as the second best running back in the league, only to Christian McCaffrey, according to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN in his positional ranking articles. Do you feel that is a little bit of a stretch? Because I love Breece Hall, but do you feel that's a stretch for a guy who's played 2 seasons in the league and missed a good half of one of them?
Absolutely friggin' not, Chase, for goodness sake. It's a long overdue praise, quite frankly, for Breece. But you make a fair point. His rookie year was cut short. He played in 7 games, blew out his ACL, was out for the rest of the year. He played in all 17 last year, but there was an 11-week stretch where he ran for 51 yards or fewer in the middle of the season. You're like, whoa, is that what a top running back does? Of course, you could look at more advanced analytics to say like yards over expected. Did Breece Hall make the most of his scenarios? And he was top 6 in the league in those running back statistics of making the most of the situations that were presented. So, no, I think the league is a little ahead on Breece Hall, at least from the panel of scouts, executives, and coaches that were polled for that reference point you made from Jeremy Fowler. And they know what's coming for Breece. And it's all about having some things around him because he's proven without things around him, he's done a really nice job. No, I think he is the second best running back in football, not named Christian McCaffrey, and the number 1 running back on that list of guys 25 or younger on that list. So he is the future of the National Football League, and he has to prove himself, of course, by showing that some of those ruts last year were not necessarily directly his fault. It was a product of the players and system around him. Zach Wilson, need I say more? So, no, I think Breece Hall is getting his well-deserved flowers, and it's, again, it's going to be put-up time. Can he ascend to the next level? I have the same questions about Garrett. Garrett, considering everything he's been through, has put up wonderful numbers considering the situation, but they haven't been elite of the elite. The reason why Garrett isn't in the conversation with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, he hasn't had 12, 13, 1,400-yard seasons. He hasn't had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 touchdowns. He's had 3 touchdowns and 4 touchdowns. Marginal numbers. He hasn't gotten to the level from a yardage standpoint. His teams, bluntly, have not been very good. The Jets have sucked. They haven't been to the playoffs. So there hasn't been a spotlight on these guys. Brees, the same sort of thing. He didn't have 1,000 yards in either year, obviously. He got hurt in his first year and the second year. Some math elites on the sideline for the Jets couldn't count up to 1,000, so he didn't get it then either. So him jumping not only to the 1,000-yard club, but the 12, 13, 14, 1,500-yard club of trying to lead the league in rushing, that will get him his credence. So yes, perhaps in August or July or June, whenever you're reading that Brees Hall list, you're like, what has this guy done? I think the league just knows that he's going to reach another level this season because the situation around him is much better.
And a lot of people don't know about that, 11 consecutive games of 50 or fewer yards, whatever it was. But a lot of people also don't know he was second amongst all running backs last year in scrimmage yards. And he did it while, again, still easing his way back from injury. So I expect major things from Brees Hall. And he's not the only young, talented guy on this team. You look at Hall, Garrett Wilson, we mentioned for a while, Quinn and Williams. We haven't even mentioned Sauce Gardner, I think, in the, what is it now, 20 minutes almost of this podcast. I mean, there are so many young talents, Quincy Williams, all these guys, but most of whom are not yet extended. Do you feel the Jets are going to be able to afford all these guys? And if not, which ones do you think they could see parting ways with?
What a tough question, Chase. You bring the tough questions to the table, and it's true. It's funny. The last couple of years, the Jets have no one. They've had no one good enough to pay. They have a bunch of money, but they're like, oh boy, there's no one worth paying here. Now, all of a sudden, there's this overflow of talent, and you've mentioned some of them, whether it's Jermaine Johnson, Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, and others that are on like those second and third levels of Michael Carter II's, Tyler Conklin's, DJ Reed's. Do you bring back Tyron Smith? Did you bring back Morgan Moses? What the heck's going on with Hassan Reddick? The Jets have, I believe it's 11 starters who are set to hit free agency next year. Tony Adams is the only one that's a restricted free agent. All the rest are unrestricted free agent. So there's a lot of big boys that are about to be free agents, and the Jets have to make those business decisions here. Can they pay them all? I think it is possible. Look at teams like the Eagles that have drafted talent. They've developed talent, and they've been able to maintain talent and keep most of those guys in-house and find a way to lock them up. I think if you want them, you can make them happen. Now, like, for instance, Dallas is a good example where you're going to have Dak Prescott is going to be the highest paid quarterback in football inevitably. You have CeeDee Lamb, who is, I think, is inevitably going to be the highest paid wide receiver. You have Micah Parsons, who's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback, so he's going to be in the 35, 36, 37 million plus. That's hard to construct a roster when you have three people that are resetting the markets completely. I think Sauce is going to reset the market for the Jets. Jermaine? I don't know. He's hovered. Last year, he had 6-7 sacks, somewhere in that ballpark. He has not been a double-digit sack guy yet. Brees, to your point, he hasn't been a 1,000-yard guy yet. Garrett has not jumped into the Jamar Chases and things of that nature. So he's in the DJ Moore category, maybe, of like 26, 27 million. Does he have this crazy year and he leapfrogs to another level? Right now, I believe they can pay everybody that they want to in terms of the core. Some of the extracurricular players, DJ Reed, he might be gone. Tyler Conklin, he might be gone. Players that are veterans that were acquired mercenaries, some of those players may be gone, but I believe they could keep the core four. But again, if a lot of these guys take leaps, like I said, Jermaine becomes a double-digit pass rusher. Brees Hall lives up to the billing. He's the second best running back in football. Garrett has a crazy year, and he's in the offensive player of the year category. All of a sudden now, the Jets are going to have to count those shekels again. Wait, wallet, what money do we have around it? Does anybody throw your money in the middle of the table? Let's see if we got enough moolah, enough scratch to make one of these guys happen. I think currently they do, but boy, things could change here with a superb 2024 season.
And I think a lot can change for New York, considering they have one of the easiest schedules in the National Football League this coming year. And a lot of people really aren't talking about that. How much of an impact will that have on their success?
Just to repeat the first part of that question, Chase.
I mean, they have one of the easiest schedules in football.
Schedules, yes. Yeah, that obviously is a big help. If you look at, this is why I think the Jets could get off to a really hot start. You look at the hard games on there. Week 1, of course, at San Francisco. That's arguably the hardest game you have on the entire schedule. You have Week 6, Buffalo Bills, Monday Night Football. The Bills, despite everything they've lost, and boy, have they lost Matt Milano and all the pieces they've lost this offseason. Yeah. Incredible. But still, the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen, who's one of the best quarterbacks in football. And can he rise the tide for the other players on the roster? That'll be curious. Patrick Mahomes was able to do it. He's won 2 straight Super Bowls since they traded away Tyreek Hill. So that one's kind of interesting to me from that standpoint. That's a tough game. But then let's be honest, Chase, between me and you, buddy, Week 2 Titans. Okay. All right. Week 3 Patriots. All righty. Denver Broncos week 4. Give me a break. Week 5, Minnesota. And sure, they're playing in London. They could be playing in Guatemala. They could be playing on planet Mars. It wouldn't matter. That team stinks. So you start going through some of those teams. You're like, okay, Pittsburgh, New England again, they're in the first half. Like, there is a lot of opportunity for the Jets to beat up on bad teams. And quite frankly, if they are the team they project to be, the team that they say they are inside the building, of the heights they believe they can achieve, then they have to beat up on those teams and do it. So yes, the schedule is incredibly favorable for the Jets. There are a couple of games, as I mentioned, cherry picked, week 1, week 6. Later in the back half of the season after the bye, you have like a game against the Rams, which is very sneaky right before Christmas. That's an incredibly difficult challenge. How did the Jets fare against Miami? You got them twice, including the regular season finale, which could have the division stakes on the line potentially. And you have a couple of playoff teams that are sprinkled in there as well. The Jets have the schedule. And again, thankfully, this is how it works in the NFL. If you are in last place, third place, whatever, you play that place schedule the following year. So the Jets being in third place in the AFC East last year, that set them up for a third place schedule, which sets them up very favorably, obviously, heading into 2024, as we've mentioned. The Bills, on the other hand, having their first place schedule, they're playing first place teams. Their schedule is much more difficult than the New York Jets. So the Jets are in a very, very favorable position. There are a couple of tough games, no question about it, but the Jets have a chance to have one of the best records in this franchise's history this season.
And that would be an incredible achievement. I think you mentioned it earlier, it's been 13 straight years now that the Jets have missed the postseason. But also, as you mentioned earlier, the expectation, at least around Jets media and the Jets fan base, is that they capture the Lombardi Trophy or at least get close to it this coming year. Be honest with me, Boy Green. Is that a reasonable expectation for a team that hasn't even gotten to the playoffs in my lifetime?
What a great setup to that question, Chase. And you asked me, Boy Green, be honest with me. I am nothing but honest with you, Chase. That's all. The thing, I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. The words coming out of my mouth are nothing but gospel, baby. And I will tell you this. It's a very fair question. Since your birth on this planet, since Chase's parents got together, and you came from the stork or wherever the heck you came from, okay, and we deliver the goods here, okay, the Jets have not delivered. But I will tell you this, the example I love to bring up is Tampa Bay. They had a very long playoff drought. I believe their last playoff game prior to the Super Bowl run was the John Gruden days, and that's going back a few decades, before you were even born, for goodness sake, I imagine. So that was the era of Tampa Bay football before. Tom Brady arrives there, first year booyah Super Bowl. And for the Jets, while we mentioned last year's this horrific thing, and it was in a lot of ways for the fans, it was absolutely devastating, obviously. But now that you've kind of gone through that, you've had this almost reset. The Hard Knocks cameras are not there at One Jets Drive. The expectations are very high inside the building. They still believe they can win the Super Bowl, to your point, which I'll get back to, is like they have the high expectations, but there's some on the outside that are kind of halfway. Some ESPN people have, Mike Clay is one that says he predicts and prognosticates the Jets will win the Super Bowl. Some people are still high on them, but not as many people are on them as there were last year. They were the sexy team. Everyone wanted to be on the Jets last year, and then they let a lot of people down, and that has scared a lot of people off. But is it realistic? Absolutely it is, and here's why. The Jets had a quarterback choice, Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers. If the Jets would have gotten Derek Carr, the goal would have been, boy, let's end the playoff drought and see what happens. When you have Aaron Rodgers, who's a guy that's won the Super Bowl, he's won the Super Bowl MVP in his past. That was also 13 years ago. Maybe there's some symmetry here, some poeticness to all of this. Aaron Rodgers has won a Super Bowl. He brings that championship level that you either have or you don't have. Like Derek Carr can't come in here talking about Super Bowls. He's never gone to a Super Bowl, never been near a Super Bowl. So like if he said that, it would fall on deaf ears. Aaron Rodgers says it. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He's a future Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's a 4-time NFL MVP. The accolade speaks for itself. The Jets do this in-house documentary series called One Jets Drive, and when the players talk about the impact Aaron Rodgers has, they say all the things I just said. The credibility he walks in with immediately, the accountability he has when guys are slacking in practice. He's like, hey, man, let's clean it up. Whoa, that's Aaron Rodgers. We can't play around. We got to be at our best at all times. It is 1,000% realistic to the Jets. Is it realistic to you, Chase? Is it realistic to people outside? Perhaps not. But only people that matter, us against the world mentality, quote unquote, for the Jets, is what they believe in that locker room. And they believe they're going to shut up a lot of people coming up this year. But the proof is in the pudding. Chase, to you, this is wah, wah, wah. Ever seen Charlie Brown, right? The parents, wah, 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 wah. I bet that's what a lot of the sounds that are coming out of my mouth sound like to you and maybe to some of your listeners, because it's been a lot of talk for the Jets, but where are the results? This is a results-oriented business. Over the last 11 years, the Jets only have one friggin' winning season, and they didn't even make the playoffs in 2015 when they went 10-6. So for the Jets, it's about putting the rubber to the road and proving that they are the team. And boy, do they have a great opportunity week 1 on the road against the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football to set the tone for the rest of the season.
They absolutely do. They have high expectations inside that locker room. They believe they can get it done. Does Paul Boy Green Esden Jr. believe they can get it done? What's your season prediction for the New York Jets?
Yeah, I believe for the first time since 2002, when you were like -40, Chase, the Jets will win the division. Again, they have not won it since 2002. I hate this other stat people bring up all the time, that the Colts have as many division titles in the AFC East as the Jets do, and the Colts haven't been inside the division since 2002. So it makes they've, it like makes no sense, but that is a statistic. So I believe the Jets win the division. That means you get a playoff game, which again the Jets haven't experienced in 13 years, and a home playoff game, which they haven't experienced in 22 years of hosting. And the last time they did that, they blew out the Peyton Manning-led Colts 41-0 at home in that playoff game 1,000 years ago. So a home playoff game makes your path a lot easier for the New York Jets, and you can kind of control the narrative. Even in the Jets playoff runs where they went to back-to-back AFC championship games in 2009, 2010, they were the road warriors, man. Mark Sanchez and that company went on the road. They went to Cincinnati. They went to then San Diego, now LA. They went to Indianapolis again. They've gone to New England, of course, as teams, and they've gone in those raucous, crazy buildings, and they've won. I think the real difference for this Jets team of accomplishing what they want to accomplish starts with controlling your destiny, winning at home, getting a home playoff game, winning the division, and going into the playoffs with people having to come to your house, and let's see what happens. So I believe the Jets win the AFC East. I believe the Jets will tie the most wins they've ever had in a regular season, which was 12 wins. They've only done that once in their history. That was 1998 when they were 12-4. We have 17 games now. They'd be 12-5 in that season. And I believe the New York Jets are going to win the Super Bowl, and they have everything in their power to be able to do it. The roster is loaded. The talent is there. The schedule is there. And then let's see what the matchups are potentially in the playoffs. Are you playing Patrick Mahomes? The Jets feel like they were robbed last year. They thought they beat Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football in Week 4, and Patrick Mahomes escapes. And there's a few questionable penalties here or there that maybe should or shouldn't have been called. And that the Jets people believe in their building they can match up with Patrick Mahomes. We'll see if that is the result. So there's a lot of good teams in the AFC, though. The Bengals, Ravens, Chiefs, Bills even. So they have their work cut out for them, but I believe the Jets will hoist the Lombardi. They will win the Super Bowl by beating the Green Bay Packers in the Super Bowl.
Wow, I think your Charlie Brown comparison is finally starting to sink in. No, I'm just messing with you, Boy Green. Anything can happen. We all love football. And yes, this Jets team is very talented. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can achieve. Paul Boy Green, Esden Jr., thank you so much for joining us today.
Chase, I just have to say the profession. How old are you, Chase? How old are you?
13.
Come on, man. Like, you're 13 years old. You're professional as all can be. You're dressed up to the nines. Your parents should be proud. A terrific show that you have here. You're the host of the Cool Sports Network, and I can see why you are emanating cool vibes here. I hope I'm just getting cooler by osmosis by my virtual face being next to your virtual face, and hopefully I can pick up some of these cool vibes. You've got an awesome show here, and thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yes, and you also have an awesome show there. Again, reminder to the entire audience that the links to all of Boy Green's shows, social media, all of that, it's all in the description. Please click below, check out some of his content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you're probably going to enjoy a lot of his shows. Boy Green, again, thank you so much. For the audience, we will wrap up the episode right here alongside Paul Boy Green, Esden Jr., the diehard Jets fan. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and we will see you next time right here from the Cool Sports Network. Take care.